This is a formal investigation that's been called under the Merchant Shipping Act. Its purpose is to attempt to establish the reasons for the fire that destroyed that ship. To all intents and purposes, this inquiry functions like a court of law. The case concerns the loss or damage of a ship. The cause may be a fault in the existing regulations or administration affecting ships at sea, or in the actual operation of the ships. If so, then the findings of the court will reveal this, and it'll be possible to do something to prevent it happening again. The Ministry are represented by the Treasury Solicitor, who briefs counsel to conduct the case on their behalf. In effect, he's the counsel for the prosecution. The witnesses are the officers and crew of the ship who are thought to be able to give some information as to what happened when the disaster occurred. These witnesses are represented by counsel.
Very well. Goodbye.
The statements of the crew members will be heard before a Queen's Counsel sitting as Wreck Commissioner, appointed by the Ministry of Transport. This is a fully legal inquiry, even though for this purpose gowns and wigs are not worn.
This court of inquiry is convened to establish the circumstances leading up to the constructive total loss of a tanker of 12...
The fault may be in one of the witnesses called here today. One or more of these men may leave this inquiry with the responsibility for the loss of a ship hung around his neck.
Of the Merchant Shipping Act of 1894. This court is now in session.
Members of the court, during the course of this inquiry, I am directed by the Ministry of Transport to pose certain questions concerning a serious fire aboard a tanker of 12,000 tons dead weight. She was on ballast passage from the Azores to the United Kingdom. The ship was 2 days out from Fayal and steaming on a course of 057 degrees true towards Land's End, where she was to receive radio orders for dry docking. On the afternoon before the disaster, the sea was calm, with a force 3 wind from the southwest. The ship carried no cargo. The tanks had been cleaned and gas-freed during the first day and night of her passage.
On the afternoon before the disaster, life in fact was fine. Seaman Haggerty's winkle-picker shoes came in for punishment. The chief engineer was working up a suntan and waiting for the tea bell. The old man left the bridge, and the third officer heaved a sigh, relaxed, and got down to the heavy responsibility of steering his course through an empty and placid tea relief. The first man to tell the Court of Inquiry how that day ended was a greaser.
On the night of the fire, at what time did you leave your cabin?
I had the middle watch, sir, the 12 till 4. I left just on 8 bells.
Now, Martin, we have to try to establish what might have caused this fire which started in your cabin. It may be that lives may be saved in the future by lessons that can be learned from this disaster. I want you to think very hard and tell us exactly what you did before you left that cabin.
Well, sir, I had my head down till just before 1 bell. Then I went to the washroom for a wash and got a mug of tea from the mess room. When I got back, I sat drinking my tea and listening to the radio.
The time is 12 midnight, and we bring you more music with a Latin beat.
smoking in your cabin?
Yes, sir.
Did you put your cigarette out before you left the cabin?
Yes, sir.
You're quite sure of that, are you?
Yes, sir. Certain.
I see. Did you turn the light off after you put the towel on the line?
No, sir. No, I didn't.
No, he didn't turn off the light. No one ever does. But his light was a special. He liked to have things nice. So he got rid of the well glass and put a rickety two-way switch in to supply his radio. That made one fairly efficient fire risk, an exposed light bulb and a length of old flex carrying the mains halfway round his cabin. Even when the radio's switched off, the flex is still alive. Then he found the light was too harsh, so he tied a piece of material around the bulb. That's not bad either. Electric light bulbs get very hot when they're well wrapped up. It doesn't need a flame to start a fire. Heat will do quite well. Then, for good measure, he stubbed his cigarette out carelessly. So we have three reasonable chances of fire here. An electrical fire caused by a short in a flex or by this two-way switch. This ashtray could slide over the edge and fall with the movement of the ship and cause a fire in the bunker. Smouldering fire could be caused by heat build-up from this light bulb. Any one of these three things could have caused this disaster.
Now, I want you to tell the Commissioner how you discovered that your cabin was on fire.
Yes, sir. Well, as I said, sir, I was on the middle watch. And I must have left my fact papers in my cabin because when I went to roll some makings, they weren't in my tin. I was in the workshop on the top flat, and I thought I could nip across the alley and get them. When I got into the alleyway, I could smell burning, but I thought it might be coming from the galley. Well, near my cabin door, the smell was much worse. Then I saw some smoke coming under my door. I tried to get in to fight the fire, but the moment I got the door open, well, it was as if it had exploded in my face. I couldn't think straight for a minute, and then I rushed for help.
And that was the most serious mistake he made, to rush off and leave the cabin door open. If he'd shut it, it would have confined the heat and limited the air supply. But now the fire had all the air it needed, and the heat build-up was spreading through the cabin door and into the alleyway. Behind that bulkhead are settling tanks with 700 gallons of fuel oil. The next mistake Martin made was to tell the first man he met to deal with the fire, while he went to raise the alarm. Seaman Haggerty had no idea what sort of fire it was. He wasn't even sure where it was. But he was clear on one thing. Fires need water. So he rushed to the wash place to get some. Which was a pity, because there was an extinguisher handy for just such an emergency as this. All this came out in the inquiry.
When you ran to get assistance, did you shut the cabin door?
No, sir.
I see. And what then?
Well, there wasn't anyone in our alley, so I ran into the cross alleyway and found Haggerty. I told him to try and put the fire out.
You told him to put the fire out? Why?
Well, somebody had to raise the alarm.
And you thought that should be your job? Did it not strike you that as you knew what was happening in your cabin, you should have sent Haggerty to raise the alarm and gone back to fight the fire yourself? Now, Martin, what did you do after you left Haggerty?
Well, I ran up the alleyway shouting fire, then I thought I'd better tell the POs. The bosun told me to warn the engine room.
Why did he do that?
Because they could tell the bridge what was happening.
What time was this?
It must have been about 3:10, sir.
The fire was discovered at 3 o'clock, and the bridge was informed 10 minutes later. Is that correct?
Yes, sir.
The fire was discovered at 0300 hours. By the time the boatswain had sent Martin to inform the engine room, it was, by Martin's evidence, 0310. 10 minutes that fire had had, all to itself. 10 minutes that meant the difference between a major disaster that brought Martin into this inquiry and an incident that might have been dealt with and settled by the efficient use of the ship's own equipment. Another lesson to learn from all this is that it pays to know where the ship's fire equipment is and what it's for. Take Haggerty, the winkle-picker shoeman who found himself lumbered with a fire to fight. He'd joined ship that voyage. Now Haggerty was a real smart aleck. He knew it all. When he came aboard, he was grabbed by the mate and roped into making ready for sea. Later, when the emergency muster list was up, he checked his station. But all he wanted to know was where to go, not what to do. There were no flies on Haggerty. He'd played in the Board of Trade sports before. Then he got on with his decorating. Now it's one thing to be summoned to a fire drill by the alarm and to go through a routine as laid down in company regulations. But what would you do if you found a fire before any alarm had been raised? If Haggerty had been a little wiser, he'd have had eyes for other things than his art gallery. Ship owners don't like to lose ships by fire, and the only firemen they've got are the crews that man them. There are firefighting notices for one's own safety as well as the ship, and it pays to read them. Yes, notices all over the ship tell you what to do, but Haggerty didn't stop to read them. If you ever have to fight a fire, what are you going to use for tools? Where are they? How do they work? All over any ship, there's a carefully planned system of first aid fire appliances. They are there for use in the early stages of any emergency. No one expects a man to put out a major fire with these things, but a couple of these, used quickly and intelligently in the first aid stages, can control a fire and even put it out before it has a chance to develop into a losing battle. First aid is a matter of splints and bandages, not surgery. Any wise man will check where these things are in relation to his cabin and the places where he may work about the ship. If you look about you, you'll find the correct appliance has already been placed where it may be needed. If you know where the nearest one is, it'll be the right one for the job.
All right, Martin, that's all.
From this point on, the history of the fire aboard that ship became confused.
The next witness is the chief officer, Mr. Wilson, sir.
Martin had shot off to raise the alarm. The second officer was on watch when the engine room called to inform the bridge. He was not available for the inquiry and couldn't give evidence. So the chief officer took up the story.
You've heard the greaser Martin say that he was told to get the engineer to inform the bridge. In the absence of the second officer, who was on watch at the time, can you say if that message was received and when?
I think so. I was off watch, but it was almost exactly 11 minutes past 3 when the alarm bell sounded and woke me up. I checked the time on the clock in my cabin. I rushed up to the bridge and found that the engine room had informed us that there was a fire in the greaser's alleyway on the starboard side. As chief officer, I immediately proceeded to the area of the fire. I couldn't get near the fire itself. There was smoke pouring out from the greaser's alleyway. It was billowing about the deck. I saw the bosun with the fire party and the hose which had been connected to the fire line outlet under the flying bridge. They were trying to bring the hose to bear on the greaser's alleyway through the watertight door on the starboard side.
Was this effort of the bosun's successful?
No, sir.
Why not?
Well, the spray jet nozzle appeared to be faulty. It was stuck in the spray position, which gives a wide curtain of water. We needed the jet to fight that fire in the alleyway.
What did you do about it?
I realized that this must be the nozzle from the firebox near the port alleyway. We'd had trouble with it for some time.
Had nothing been done about it?
Well, I told the third officer to get it seen to, but... Well, he obviously hadn't.
Bloody quick! And then?
The bosun had a portable extinguisher and he ran into the alley with it. He hadn't a chance. The alley was full of smoke and he had no breathing apparatus. I sent them for portable breathing apparatus from midships.
Get that hose over! I see.
Use the clarion line, quick!
And what were the hose party doing while this was going on?
I detailed a party to fetch hoses from the midships and another to the port side aft. My idea was to get at the rear of the fire.
Get the hose from the starboard top!
Then the hose slipped due to the high pressure against the closed nozzle.
This was the beginning of the end. By now the fire had spread to the PO's accommodation on the upper deck. Steel bulkheads transmit heat very efficiently. The steel bulkheads in the fireman's alleyway had spread the fire into the engine room. The settling tanks had gone on fire and blazing fuel oil was falling into the bilges. The heat was also spreading through the door that Martin had so helpfully left open. On the bridge at 0335 hours, the master had sent out a signal asking all shipping in the area to stand by, and he turned the ship across wind. The engine room was battened down at 0356 hours, and hoses were rigged to fight the fire from above. At 0403 there was an explosion, and the fire roared up through the broken engine room skylights and the boat deck plating. At 0405 the master sent an SOS signal and ordered non-essential crew off the ship to stand by in the boats at a safe distance. Easy.
Oh, blimey. Look at her. It's easy to be wise after the event. But when you think what could have happened, for instance, it's quite clear that some of the fire hoses and nozzles on that ship were badly maintained. This is something that should never happen.
I agree.
No matter how long an officer may go, without having experienced a fire on his ship, it's a crime to his shipmates and his owners to allow the gear to get into such a state that it can't do its job when it's needed.
That greaser Martin should have stayed to fight the fire with the appliances that were to hand, and Stephen Haggerty should have gone straight to the bridge.
Hoses should have been brought into play earlier. It's no good waiting to see if the fire's getting bad enough to need hoses. Get them to work right away. It's better to have too many fire appliances bearing on the fire than too few. And a lost ship.
I'd say that only 3 men had a chance to do anything about that fire. The boatswain, Seaman Haggerty, and most of all, Greaser Martin, who found the fire in the first place.
Well, that's always the case. In any fire, there are moments when the action of one man may influence the whole thing, one way or the other. Moments of truth, you might say. They happen for the boatswain and Seaman Haggerty. 3 men. We shall never know what 2 of them did. The boatswain with his 2-gallon extinguisher with which he bravely, though unwisely, tried to do some good when the gear he should have been able to rely on let him down. He died in the fire. By the time the breathing apparatus had been organized, it was too late. What Seaman Haggerty did is not clear because he was found badly burned in the fireman's alleyway and he died in the boats. The 3rd man, the only one of those 3 who's alive to tell the tale, is Greaser Martin, the man who had the first chance to do something about it while it was a minor incident. And I wouldn't want to be in his shoes, poor devil.
Oh, that's right. You feel sorry for me, mate. I suppose you think I did the wrong thing. Well, let me tell you something. Until you've been through it yourself, you've got no cause to judge. A fire at sea is a bloody terrifying thing. Maybe I didn't do the right thing. But if any of you reckon you'll have time to think when it happens, you're a bloody idiot. If you don't know now what you'll do, you'll never know. You'll probably burn. And serve you right, I say.
I walked out one morning fair, all in the month of June. I overheard an Irish girl a-singing this old tune. Far, far, far down below, it's fetch a bucket of water, girls, there's fire down below. There's fire in the foretop, there's fire in the main. Fetch a bucket of water, girls, and put it out again.